The asteroid mining station Kepler's Edge hung in the void like a metal spider. Its 8 docking arms extended toward the resource-rich belt that had made the galactic mining consortium wealthy beyond measure. Inside the station's bustling maintenance bay, Chief Mechanic Jake Morrison wiped grease from his hands and surveyed the chaos of broken equipment that never seemed to end. Another plasma drill core, completely fried, muttered Zixtal, a mantis-like Thackeray whose 4 arms made him invaluable in the repair bay. His translator device crackled as he spoke, converting his clicking mandibles into standard galactic. These mining crews push everything past safety limits. Jake nodded, examining the blackened component. At 42, he was one of the few humans working this far out in the Rim territories, where most species considered his kind too fragile for deep space operations. The irony wasn't lost on him. The humans were seen as the delicate ones when they'd been the first to crack faster-than-light travel through sheer stubborn determination. Schedule it for a full rebuild, Jake said, making notes on his datapad. And tell the crew chief that if they keep redlining their equipment, they're going to lose more than just drill time. The maintenance base suddenly filled with the sound of young voices speaking in rapid galactic standard. A group of alien children had pressed their faces against the observation window that separated the public walkway from the work area. Jake recognized them as offspring of various station personnel, a mix of Thackeray younglings, a few Zolonian cubs with their distinctive blue fur, and what looked like a young Vorthan whose crystalline skin caught the overhead lights. "Look at all the broken machines," one of the Zolonian cubs was saying, her voice carrying through the intercom system. "My parent says humans break everything they touch because they're too primitive to understand real technology." Jake's jaw tightened, but he'd heard worse. The galaxy's view of humanity hadn't improved much since first contact 60 years ago. Most species saw humans as barely evolved apes who'd stumbled onto FDL by accident. "That's not the worst part," added a young Thackeray, his antennae twitching with excitement. "I heard the human thinks he has invisible helpers. My clutch sibling in security says he talks to empty air and gives orders to nothing." The children erupted in chittering laughter. Jake felt heat rise in his cheeks as Zixtal shot him a sympathetic look with his compound eyes. "Invisible helpers," scoffed the Vorthan child, her voice like wind chimes. "Next he'll claim they're elves or some other mythological nonsense. Everyone knows elves don't exist. They're just made-up creatures from primitive human folklore." More laughter from the group. Jake had endured months of whispered comments about his imaginary friends and primitive superstitions. The truth was far more complex than any of these young aliens could understand. "Come on, Jake," Zixtal said quietly. "Ignore them. We have work to do." But Jake was already walking toward the intercom panel. He pressed the transmission button, and his voice carried clearly into the hallway. "You kids want to see something interesting?" he called out. "How about a demonstration of human primitive engineering?" The young aliens fell silent, surprised that the human had addressed them directly. Several adult aliens in the corridor stopped to see what was happening, including Security Chief Mordau, a hulking Draknari whose species resembled upright crocodiles. "I've got a challenge for you," Jake continued, warming to his theme. "See that pile of broken equipment over there? 3 plasma drills, 2 atmosphere processors, and a gravity generator that's been giving everyone headaches for weeks. Your parents' people have been trying to fix them for days." He gestured toward a section of the bay where tagged and cataloged equipment awaited repair. "I'll get them all working again in the next hour. But here's the interesting part. I'm going to do it with the help of my imaginary friends." The Vorthan child pressed closer to the window, her crystalline features reflecting curiosity despite her earlier mockery. "You're going to pretend invisible elves are helping you." "Not pretend," Jake said with a grin. "The real thing. And when I'm done, maybe you'll understand that the universe is bigger and stranger than your species teach you." Security Chief Mordau stepped forward, his massive form casting a shadow over the smaller beings. "Human Morrison, what are you planning? I won't have you filling these younglings' heads with nonsense." "No nonsense, Chief," Jake replied respectfully. Just a practical demonstration. You're welcome to observe and record everything if you want scientific verification. The crowd in the corridor was growing as word spread through the station's communication network. Jake had worked here for 8 months, keeping his head down and doing his job competently enough that most crew members tolerated his presence. But he'd never made a public spectacle of himself like this. Zixtal approached him cautiously. Jake, what are you doing? You're going to make them think humans are even more primitive if you start talking to empty air. Trust me, old friend, Jake said, rolling up his sleeves. It's time these people learned something about human capabilities they don't teach in xenobiology classes. He walked over to the first broken plasma drill, a massive piece of equipment that stood nearly 3 meters tall. The diagnostic readout showed catastrophic failure in the main power coupling, damage to the crystalline matrix that focused the plasma beam, and what appeared to be a complete burnout of the quantum field stabilizers. Right then, Jake said, speaking to seemingly empty air, "Looks like we've got our work cut out for us. What do you think, Pip? Can you handle the quantum stabilizers while Tinker works on the power coupling?" The watching aliens exchanged glances. Several of the children giggled, but Jake noticed that some of the adults looked uncomfortable. There was something about his tone, confident and conversational, as if he were actually addressing someone. Jake began working, but his movements seemed odd to the observers. He would reach for tools before he appeared to know he needed them, as if they were being handed to him. When he worked on complex internal components, he seemed to be coordinating his efforts with others, pausing to let someone work on areas his hands couldn't reach. "Quantum field stabilizer is responding," Jake announced, reading data from his diagnostic scanner. "Good work, Pip. Now, Tinker, if you can reroute the power flow through the backup channels while I replace the primary coupling." As he worked, Jake kept up a steady stream of conversation with his unseen companions. He thanked Cogs for tightening bolts in impossible-to-reach places, asked Sparks to test electrical connections, and coordinated timing with Wrench on synchronized repairs. The watching crowd had grown to nearly 30 beings representing a dozen species. Station Commander Thelnara, a dignified Altarian with flowing tentacles for hair, had arrived and was observing with obvious scientific curiosity. "The human appears to be exhibiting signs of multiple personality disorder," suggested Dr. Vexrin, the station's chief medical officer, a tall gray being with oversized eyes. "Perhaps the isolation of deep space has affected his mental stability." But even as the doctor spoke, the plasma drill status lights began changing from red to amber to green. Diagnostic readings that had shown total system failure were now displaying normal operational parameters. "First machine operational," Jake announced, stepping back from the plasma drill with obvious satisfaction. "Fully repaired and tested. Performance actually exceeds original specifications." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The repair work that should have taken a team of technicians several days had been completed by one human in 20 minutes. Jake moved to the second plasma drill, this one with an even more complex failure pattern. As he began working, his conversation with his helpers became more animated. "I know it's a tricky repair, Gears, but that's why you're the best at fine mechanical work," he said, apparently responding to something only he could hear. "If you can handle the internal calibration while I work on the external housing, we'll have this baby singing like new." The young Vorthan who had mocked the idea of elves was now pressed against the window, her crystalline skin pulsing with colors that indicated deep fascination among her species. "How is he making those repairs?" she whispered to one of the Thackeray younglings. "Some of those components are inside sealed sections. He can't reach them." It was true. The observers could see Jake's hands working on external sections of the equipment, while simultaneously, internal components were being adjusted and repaired. Diagnostic scanners showed work being done in multiple locations at once, far more than one person could manage. "Could he have some kind of remote manipulation technology?" suggested one of the adult observers. "Advanced micro-robots, perhaps." Commander Thelnara activated her personal scanner and aimed it at the work area. "No artificial technology detected," she reported, her voice carrying a note of confusion. "No robots, no remote manipulators, no hidden devices of any kind. Jake overheard the conversation and chuckled. No hidden technology, Commander. Just good old-fashioned human ingenuity and some friends who aren't bound by the same physical limitations as the rest of us. The second plasma drill came online with a satisfying hum of perfectly calibrated systems. Jake patted its housing affectionately before moving to the third and most damaged unit. This one's going to be the real challenge, he said, examining the diagnostic readout. Core matrix is completely shattered, power systems are fried, and the containment field generators are barely holding together. What do you think, team? Can we save her? He paused, as if listening to responses from multiple sources, then nodded. You're right, Clockwork. If we rebuild the core matrix from scratch and upgrade the containment system, she'll be better than new. Pip, can you handle the quantum work while Sparks rewires the power grid? As Jake began the most complex repair, something unprecedented happened. Tools that he wasn't touching began moving on their own, apparently manipulated by invisible hands. Bolts twisted out of their housings without anyone turning them. Components that should have required multiple people to position were maneuvered into place with impossible precision. The watching aliens fell completely silent. Even the children stopped their chatter as they witnessed what appeared to be multiple invisible beings working in perfect coordination with the human mechanic. Dr. Vexrin's scanner was working overtime, sweeping the area for any possible explanation. This is impossible, he muttered. Multiple entities appear to be manipulating matter, but I'm detecting no life signs, no energy patterns, nothing that should be capable of producing these effects. Unless, Commander Thelnaras said slowly, we're witnessing something that our science doesn't yet understand. Jake was now deep in conversation with his unseen helpers, coordinating a repair that involved rebuilding the plasma drill's core systems from the ground up. The work was incredibly complex, requiring precise timing and coordination between multiple simultaneous operations. Careful with that quantum resonance frequency, Pip, Jake cautioned. If we're off by even a fraction, the whole matrix will collapse. Gears, can you hold that stabilization field while Tinker reroutes the power flow? The young aliens watched in amazement as the impossible repair proceeded. Components moved through the air as if carried by invisible hands. Delicate adjustments were made to systems that were supposedly beyond the reach of any tools. The work progressed with efficiency and precision that would have been impressive even for a full team of expert technicians. The human is coordinating with multiple entities. Observe the Vorthan child, her earlier mockery replaced by wonder. They're working together like a real team. But who are they? Asked one of the Thackeray younglings. If they're not imaginary, what are they? Jake overheard the question and looked up from his work. They're exactly what I said they were. Friends. Helpers. And, yes, if you want to use the old human term, you could call them elves. Security Chief Mordow stepped forward, his massive frame intimidating even through the protective barrier. Human Morrison, explain what we are witnessing. Our sensors detect no additional life forms, no technology that could produce these effects. That's because you're looking for things that exist in your understanding of reality, Jake replied, not pausing in his work. My friends operate on different principles. There were human folklore called elves, fairies, brownies, or house spirits, depending on the culture. Beings that exist just outside normal physical laws, but can interact with our world when they choose to. Impossible, Dr. Vexrin interjected. Such entities would violate fundamental laws of physics. Jake chuckled as an invisible hand passed him exactly the tool he needed without him having to look for it. Doctor, 60 years ago, your people thought faster-than-light travel was impossible. 50 years ago, most species thought it was impossible for organic beings to survive the transition through hyperspace without technological life support. Human history is full of impossible things that turn out to be perfectly natural once you understood the rules. The third plasma drill was nearing completion, and its diagnostic display was showing readings that exceeded the original manufacturer specifications. Whatever Jake and his unseen helpers were doing, they weren't just repairing the equipment, they were improving it. How long have you been able to work with these entities? Commander Thelnara asked, her scientific curiosity overcoming her skepticism. Since I was a kid, Jake replied, making final adjustments to the plasma drill's control systems. Most human children can see them and interact with them naturally. As we grow up, most of us lose the ability. But some humans, especially those who work with their hands and understand how things work, can maintain the connection. He gestured toward his invisible companions. They're drawn to craftsmanship and creativity. They love solving mechanical problems and making things work better. In the old days on Earth, before we had advanced technology, they would help human craftsmen, blacksmiths, and inventors. Now, they help with more complex equipment. The third plasma drill came online with a perfect hum of optimized systems. Jake stepped back and wiped his hands on a rag, looking satisfied with the work. 3 down, he announced. Now for the atmospheric processors and that gravity generator. But the crowd's attention was focused on something else. The young Vorthan child was staring intently at the space around Jake, her crystalline skin flickering with rapid color changes. I can see them, she whispered, her voice filled with awe. They're small, and they glow faintly, and they're everywhere around the human. How is that possible? Several other children began nodding excitedly. I see them too, exclaimed one of the Thackeray younglings. They're beautiful, Dr. Vexrin immediately focused his scanners on the children. Fascinating. Juvenile neural patterns are different from adult configurations. Perhaps younger minds are more receptive to phenomena that adult brains filter out as impossible. Jake smiled as he moved toward the atmosphere processors. Kids see the truth that adults learn to ignore. That's true for every species in the galaxy, apparently. As he began work on the atmospheric equipment, more of the watching children began pointing out the small, glowing figures that seemed to dance around the human mechanic. Adults who couldn't see anything were forced to rely on their instruments and the testimony of their young. This changes everything we thought we knew about human capabilities, Commander Thelnara said quietly. If they can partner with entities that exist outside our understanding of physics, it explains a lot about how humans achieved things that should have been beyond their technological level, added Dr. Vexrin. Their rapid development of FTL technology, their uncanny ability to innovate solutions to impossible problems. Jake was now deep in conversation with his helpers as they tackled the complex atmospheric processors. The equipment had been designed to maintain breathable atmosphere for multiple species with different biological requirements, and the failure of its filtering systems had been causing problems throughout the station. I know it's delicate work, Tinker, Jake said to seemingly empty air. But if we can recalibrate the molecular filters and upgrade the processing algorithms, we can increase efficiency by at least 30%. Sparks, can you handle the electrical modifications while Clockwork works on the mechanical adjustments? The repair proceeded with the same impossible efficiency as the previous work. Components that should have required disassembly for access were somehow being repaired from the inside. Systems that normally took hours to calibrate were being fine-tuned in minutes. As word of the demonstration spread throughout the station, more aliens arrived to witness what was happening. Scientists, engineers, and curious crew members packed the observation area, all trying to understand how one human was accomplishing repairs that should have required teams of specialists. The young Vorthan child who had first started seeing Jake's helpers was now describing them in detail to the fascinated adults. They're about half the size of the human, and they each have different specialties. The one working on the electrical systems has tools that glow with energy. The one doing mechanical work has hands that can change shape to fit any space. Her description was being recorded and analyzed by the station's xenobiology team. If human children could interact with entities that adult humans called elves, and if alien children could learn to see them as well, it suggested possibilities that challenged fundamental assumptions about reality and consciousness. The atmosphere processors came online one by one, each showing performance levels that exceeded their original design specifications. The air in the station immediately began to feel cleaner and fresher as the upgraded systems began working more efficiently. Just the gravity generator left, Jake announced, approaching the final piece of equipment. This one's been the real troublemaker, hasn't it, friends? He examined the massive device that controlled artificial gravity throughout the station's inhabited sections. According to the diagnostic reports, it had been suffering from quantum fluctuations that caused uncomfortable variations in gravity levels. The problem had been deemed too complex for field repair and had been scheduled for replacement with a new unit that wouldn't arrive for several weeks. The quantum matrix is completely unstable, Jake said, studying the readouts. We're going to need to rebuild it from scratch and implement some new stabilization protocols. What do you think, team? Ready for the big challenge? As Jake and his invisible helpers began their work on the gravity generator, the watching crowd realized they were witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. A single human, working with entities that existed beyond conventional understanding, was solving complex technological problems with an efficiency and innovation that challenged everything they thought they knew about both humans and the nature of reality itself. The demonstration was far from over, but already the implications were staggering. If humans could partner with beings that other species couldn't even perceive, what did that mean for humanity's role in the galactic community? And what other impossible capabilities might the supposedly primitive human race possess? The gravity generator represented the most complex challenge yet. Unlike the other equipment, it was still partially operational, which meant Jake couldn't simply shut it down for repairs without affecting the entire inhabited section of the station. The device controlled artificial gravity for nearly 10,000 beings across multiple decks, and any mistake could result in catastrophic consequences. We'll have to do this repair while the system is running, Jake explained to the growing crowd of observers. It's like performing surgery on a beating heart. One wrong move, and everyone on the station could find themselves floating in zero gravity or crushed under excessive gravitational force. Dr. Vex Rin stepped forward, his large eyes reflecting genuine concern. Human Morrison, perhaps this demonstration has gone far enough. The risks are too great. If something goes wrong, nothing will go wrong, Jake replied confidently, running his hands over the gravity generator's control interface. My friends have been helping humans accomplish impossible things for thousands of years. They understand quantum mechanics better than most physics professors. He paused, appearing to listen to voices only he could hear. That's right, Pip. The quantum resonance cascade is the key. If we can stabilize the field fluctuations at the source, the whole system will smooth out. But we'll need to work on multiple levels simultaneously. The young Vorthan child pressed even closer to the observation window, her crystalline skin now pulsing with rapid silver patterns that indicated extreme excitement among her species. There are more of them now, she whispered to the other children. They're bringing tools I've never seen before, and some of them are different, bigger, more complex. Jake began working on the gravity generator with movements that seemed almost choreographed. His hands moved to specific components, while invisible entities appeared to be making adjustments elsewhere in the system. The diagnostic displays showed work being performed in dozens of locations simultaneously, a feat that should have required an entire team of specialists with sophisticated coordination equipment. The quantum field matrix is responding to modifications, reported Chief Engineer Aelthera, a tall, slender Centaurian who had arrived with a collection of advanced scanning equipment. But the energy patterns I'm detecting don't match any known technology. It's as if the quantum fields themselves are being directly manipulated without intermediate devices. Commander Thelnara studied her own readings with fascination. Engineer Aelthera, have your people ever encountered anything like this before? The Centaurian's antennae twitched in what passed for a negative gesture among her species. Never, Commander. The precision of these quantum manipulations exceeds our most advanced laboratory equipment, and the entities performing the work aren't registering on any of our sensors designed to detect known forms of life or artificial intelligence. Jake continued his conversation with his unseen helpers as they worked on the gravity generator's most critical systems. I know it's risky clockwork, but if we can't stabilize the quantum cascade at the source, the whole station could experience gravity fluctuations for weeks. Gears, can you handle the mechanical stabilizers while Pip works on the quantum resonance chambers? The repairs were proceeding at an incredible pace. Systems that should have taken days to access and modify were being adjusted in real time. The gravity generator's quantum matrix, which had been plagued by unstable fluctuations for weeks, was beginning to show steady, consistent readings. Security Chief Mordal had been unusually quiet during the demonstration, but now he stepped forward with obvious reluctance. Human Morrison, I must ask directly, are these entities under your control? Could they potentially pose a security threat to the station? Jake paused in his work and looked directly at the massive Draknari. They're not under anyone's control, Chief. They're partners, not servants. They choose to help because they enjoy solving complex problems and creating things that work better. As for security threats, he appeared to listen to invisible voices before continuing. They're probably the safest beings you could encounter. All they care about is craftsmanship and making things work properly. But what are they exactly? Pressed Dr. Vexerin. If they're not technology, not artificial intelligence, not any known form of life, what category of existence do they represent? They're what humans have always called them, Jake replied, making delicate adjustments to the gravity generator's control systems. Elves, fairies, brownies, house spirits, workshop helpers. Different human cultures had different names for them, but they've always been there helping humans who work with their hands and understand how things function. The young Thackeray Clutchling clicked excitedly. My parent in the xenobiology department says that human folklore contains references to helpful spirits throughout their recorded history. But we always assumed they were mythological constructs, not actual entities. Most of galactic science assumes the same thing, Jake said with a grin. That's why humans have an advantage in certain areas. We never forgot that the universe contains more than what conventional sensors can detect. The gravity generator was now operating more smoothly than it had since its initial installation. The quantum fluctuations that had been causing problems throughout the station were completely eliminated, and the artificial gravity field was running at optimal efficiency with remarkably stable parameters. Fascinating, murmured Commander Thelnara, studying her readings. The modifications being made exceed anything in our technical manuals. The efficiency improvements alone could revolutionize artificial gravity technology. But Jake was far from finished. As he worked with his invisible helpers, he began implementing modifications that went beyond simple repairs. You know what, friends? As long as we're here, why don't we upgrade this system properly? Add some redundancy, improve the quantum field stability, maybe boost the efficiency by 40 or 50%. The watching engineers exchanged shocked glances. The modifications Jake was describing would normally require months of design work, extensive testing, and complete system replacement. But as they watched, the gravity generator began displaying performance parameters that exceeded its original specifications by enormous margins. The human is essentially redesigning the system in real time, reported Chief Engineer Althara, her voice carrying a note of disbelief. The quantum field configurations being implemented are more sophisticated than anything in our databases. This is revolutionary technology. Word of the demonstration had spread throughout the station's computer network, and the observation area was now packed with representatives from dozens of species. Scientists, engineers, administrators, and curious civilians crowded around the windows and monitoring stations, all trying to understand what they were witnessing. Jake noticed the attention, but seemed completely comfortable with the scrutiny. The thing about working with elves, he explained as he made final adjustments to the gravity generator, is that they see possibilities that most people miss. They're not limited by conventional thinking about how things should work. They understand the underlying principles better than anyone. The young Vorthan child who had been the first to see Jake's helpers was now describing them in even greater detail to the fascinated adults. The one working on the quantum systems is almost glowing with energy, and its hands move through solid matter like it's not there. The mechanical specialist can reshape its tools to fit any space, no matter how small or complex. And there's a new one now, bigger than the others, that seems to be coordinating everything. Dr. Vexrin was recording everything the child said, while simultaneously running every scan he could think of. Young Krilana, can you estimate how many entities are present? The Vorthan child considered the question carefully, her crystalline features flickering with concentration. It's hard to count because they move so quickly, but I think there are at least 8 or 9 around the human. And they're all different sizes and specialties. Some are tiny and work on very delicate things, while others are larger and handle the heavy adjustments. The gravity generator was now running at peak efficiency, displaying operational parameters that would have been considered impossible just hours earlier. The improvements Jake and his helpers had implemented would save the station enormous amounts of energy while providing more stable and comfortable artificial gravity throughout all inhabited sections. System optimization complete, Jake announced, stepping back from the gravity generator with obvious satisfaction. Performance improvements of 53% over original specifications, energy consumption reduced by 31%, and quantum field stability increased to well beyond design parameters. Spontaneous applause broke out among the watching engineers and technicians. Even species that weren't naturally inclined toward such displays of appreciation found themselves impressed by what they had witnessed. But Commander Thelnara was already thinking beyond the immediate demonstration. Human Morrison, the implications of what you've shown us today extend far beyond equipment repair. If humans can partner with entities that exist outside our current understanding of physics, it might explain how humans achieved faster-than-light technology so quickly after first contact, completed Chief Engineer Althara, and why human innovations often solve problems in ways that our science suggests shouldn't work. Jake nodded thoughtfully. Humans have always been good at finding practical solutions to impossible problems. We don't get stuck thinking about why something can't work. We just figure out how to make it work anyway. Dr. Vexrin approached with his scanner still active, studying the area around Jake where the children could apparently see his invisible helpers. The energy patterns in this vicinity are unlike anything in our scientific literature. The quantum field fluctuations suggest the presence of entities that exist partially outside normal spacetime. That would explain why our conventional sensors can't detect them, added the Zentorian engineer. If they operate on quantum levels that our instruments aren't designed to measure. Jake chuckled as he began cleaning his tools. You're making it more complicated than it needs to be, folks. Sometimes the simplest explanation is the right one. Humans call them elves because that's what they are, beings that exist alongside our reality and choose to help when they encounter someone who appreciates good craftsmanship. The demonstration was officially over, but the implications were just beginning to sink in throughout the station's population. Representatives from various species were already requesting formal reports, detailed sensor logs, and extensive interviews with Jake and the children who had been able to see his helpers. Security Chief Mordal approached Jake as the crowds began to disperse. Human Morrison, I owe you an apology. I've spent months assuming you were exhibiting signs of mental instability. I should have investigated more thoroughly before reaching conclusions. No harm done, Chief, Jake replied amicably. Most people have trouble accepting things that fall outside their normal experience. But maybe now the station crew will have a little more respect for human capabilities. The young aliens who had initially mocked Jake were now gathering around the observation window, asking excited questions about what they had witnessed. The Vorthan child who had first seen his helpers was becoming something of a celebrity among her peers. "Can all humans work with elves?" she asked eagerly. "Are there different types of elves for different kinds of work? How do humans learn to communicate with them?" Jake smiled as he answered their questions. Not all humans can maintain the connection into adulthood, but more than most people realize. As for different types, yes, there are elves who specialize in mechanical work, others who are better with electronics or quantum systems. And communication isn't really learned so much as remembered. Most human children are born with the ability. Dr. Vexrin was taking detailed notes of everything Jake said. This suggests that the phenomenon is linked to specific neural development patterns in human children. The ability to perceive and interact with these entities might be a natural part of human cognitive architecture, which would explain why human technological development has been so rapid and unconventional, added Commander Thelnara. If your species has access to assistance from entities that understand physics at levels we can't perceive. The conversation continued for hours as station personnel struggled to understand the implications of what they had witnessed. The simple demonstration of repair work had evolved into a revelation that challenged fundamental assumptions about human capabilities and the nature of reality itself. As the day cycle progressed and the crowds finally began to disperse, Jake found himself with a new level of respect from his colleagues. But more importantly, he had opened minds to possibilities that most galactic species had never considered. The young aliens who had learned to see his helpers were already spreading word throughout their peer groups, describing the small, glowing beings who helped the human mechanic accomplish impossible things. And in the station scientific departments, researchers were beginning to design new experiments and develop new theories to explain phenomena that had previously been dismissed as primitive human superstition. The galaxy was about to learn that humans possessed capabilities that went far beyond what conventional science could measure or explain. And Jake Morrison, chief mechanic of a remote asteroid mining station, had just become the catalyst for a revolution in understanding that would reshape interspecies relations throughout known space. News of Jake Morrison's demonstration spread through galactic communication networks faster than anyone had anticipated. Within 72 hours, the remote asteroid mining station Kepler's Edge found itself at the center of the biggest scientific controversy in recent memory. Ships began arriving from across the sector, carrying researchers, xenobiologists, quantum physicists, and government officials from dozens of species, all demanding to witness the human who worked with invisible entities. Jake found the sudden attention overwhelming. His simple maintenance bay had been transformed into a makeshift research laboratory, with sophisticated scanning equipment from multiple civilizations monitoring his every movement. Representatives from the Galactic Scientific Council, the Zentorian Institute of Quantum Studies, and the Thackeray Academy of Xenobiology had established temporary research stations throughout the asteroid facility. "This is getting out of hand," Jake muttered to Zixtal as they navigated through crowds of alien scientists to reach their normal workstations. "I just wanted to fix some broken equipment and maybe get those kids to stop making fun of humans." The mantis-like Thackeray clicked his mandibles in what passed for laughter among his people. "My friend, you have accomplished something far beyond that simple goal. The Xenobiology department back on my home world is calling this the greatest discovery since first contact. You forced the entire galaxy to reconsider their understanding of human capabilities." Dr. Yelnara, the lead researcher from the Galactic Scientific Council, approached them with her usual collection of scanning devices and data pads. The tall, ethereal Altarian had been following Jake around for days, documenting everything he did, and said, "Mechanic Morrison, we've scheduled another demonstration for this afternoon. Representatives from 16 different species have requested to observe your work with these entities. We've also arranged for some of the galaxy's most advanced children to be present, to see if they can develop the same perceptual abilities as the young ones here on the station." Jake sighed. "Doctor, I appreciate the scientific interest, but I'm not a performing monkey. I have actual work to do." This station's equipment doesn't maintain itself, and I've got a backlog of repairs that's getting longer every day. But that's perfect, Dr. Yelnara exclaimed, her tentacle-like hair writhing with excitement. You can perform your normal duties while we observe and document the process. We need to understand how this human entity cooperation functions in practical applications. Before Jake could respond, Commander Thelnara's voice echoed through the station's communication system. All personnel to emergency stations. We have a critical situation in the main power core. Primary fusion reactor is experiencing quantum cascade failure. All non-essential personnel evacuate affected sections immediately. The maintenance bay erupted in chaos as alarms began blaring throughout the station. Jake grabbed his emergency kit and headed for the door, but Dr. Yelnara blocked his path. This is an unprecedented opportunity for observation, she said excitedly. A critical repair situation that requires maximum cooperation between you and your entities. We must document everything. Doctor, get out of my way, Jake said firmly. When a main reactor starts failing, people can die. This isn't a research opportunity, it's a crisis. He pushed past the protesting scientist and ran toward the power core section, followed by a crowd of researchers who were more interested in documenting his response than in the actual emergency. Zixtal ran alongside him, his four arms managing multiple diagnostic devices. How bad is quantum cascade failure? Jake asked as they navigated through evacuation routes filled with frightened station personnel. Very bad, Zixtal replied, his translator device crackling with static from the electromagnetic interference. If the containment field collapses, the fusion reaction could destroy the entire station. And if the quantum cascade spreads to other systems, they reached the power core chamber to find Chief Engineer Ina Thera and her team in full panic mode. The main fusion reactor, a massive device that provided power for the entire mining operation, was displaying warning lights and alarms that indicated imminent catastrophic failure. Human Morrison, the Zentorian engineer called out as she saw Jake arrive. The quantum containment field is destabilizing. We've tried everything in the technical manuals, but the cascade effect is beyond our ability to control. The automatic safety systems want to shut down the reactor completely, but that would leave us without power for life support. Jake studied the reactor's diagnostic displays, while alien scientists crowded around him with their recording equipment. The readings were worse than anything he'd seen before. The quantum cascade that contained and controlled the fusion reaction was spiraling out of control, creating feedback loops that threatened to tear apart the reactor's containment systems. How long before complete failure, he asked. 37 minutes at current degradation rate, reported one of Ina Thera's technicians. Maybe less if the cascade accelerates. Jake rubbed his forehead, thinking furiously. Right then, this is going to require the full team. Emergency protocols, maximum cooperation, and some modifications that aren't in any technical manual. He walked to the main reactor console and began speaking to seemingly empty air. I know this is the biggest challenge we've ever faced together, friends. The quantum cascade is completely out of control, and conventional technology can't stabilize it. We're going to need to work on levels that most of these scientists don't even know exist. Dr. Yelnara pushed forward with her scanners. The energy patterns around the human are intensifying dramatically. I'm detecting quantum field fluctuations that exceed anything we recorded during his previous demonstrations. The young Vorthan child, Krilana, had somehow made her way to the power core section despite evacuation orders. She pressed against the observation barrier and gasped audibly. There are so many of them now. They're everywhere around the reactor, and some of them are huge. They're glowing so brightly I can barely look at them. Jake was now deep in conversation with his invisible helpers, coordinating what appeared to be an incredibly complex operation. Pip, I need you and the quantum specialist to work on stabilizing the cascade at the core level. Clockwork, can your team handle the mechanical stabilizers? And we're going to need the big guns for this one. Can you call in the Forge Masters? Forge Masters, Dr. Yelnara questioned, her scanners working frantically. What are Forge Masters? The elves who specialize in the most fundamental levels of matter and energy, Jake explained as he began working on the reactor's control systems. They usually only get involved when something threatens to tear apart reality itself. A runaway fusion reaction with quantum cascade failure definitely qualifies. The work that followed was unlike anything the watching scientists had ever witnessed. Jake appeared to be coordinating with dozens of invisible entities, each working on different aspects of the failing reactor system. Tools moved through the air without anyone holding them. Control panels activated themselves. Deep within the reactor's core, components that should have been impossible to reach were being adjusted and modified. The quantum field patterns are changing in ways that violate known physics, reported Dr. Vexerin, who had arrived with an entire team of medical and scientific personnel. The cascade effect is being controlled and redirected through methods that our instruments can't even measure. Chief Engineer Elthera was monitoring the reactor's status displays with growing amazement. The containment field strength is increasing beyond design parameters. The quantum cascade is being restructured into a stable configuration that actually improves reactor efficiency. Jake continued his coordination efforts, his voice becoming more urgent as the situation developed. The cascade is fighting us, but we can redirect it if we work on multiple quantum levels simultaneously. Gears, I need micro-adjustments on the field generators. Sparks, can you reroute the energy flow through the backup channels while the Forge Masters work on the core matrix? The young aliens who had gathered in the observation area were describing what they could see to the fascinated adults. The big ones are working inside the reactor itself, Krelana reported, her crystalline skin pulsing with rapid patterns. They're reshaping the energy itself, making it flow in new patterns that are more stable and controlled. Dr. Yelnara's instruments were recording unprecedented data. The quantum manipulations being performed exceed our most advanced theoretical models. It's as if the fundamental forces of physics are being directly controlled and reshaped. 20 minutes into the crisis, something remarkable began happening. The reactor's warning alarms started going silent one by one. The dangerous red warning lights shifted to amber, then to green. The quantum cascade that had threatened to destroy the station was being transformed into a stable, controlled reaction that actually improved the reactor's performance. This is impossible, muttered one of the Zentorian physicists. The energy output is increasing while the instability decreases. The reactor is operating at efficiency levels that exceed theoretical maximums. Jake wiped sweat from his forehead as he made final adjustments to the reactor's control systems. Not impossible, just a different approach to quantum mechanics. When you understand that energy and matter are more flexible than most people think, you can accomplish things that seem impossible. Commander Thilnara's voice echoed through the communication system. All sections report normal status. Emergency situation resolved. Evacuation orders canceled. But the real surprise came when the reactor specialists examined the final configuration of their power system. Not only had Jake and his invisible helpers prevented catastrophic failure, they had fundamentally redesigned the reactor's operation to be more efficient, more stable, and more powerful than its original specifications. The modifications implemented during the crisis represent advances in fusion technology that our civilization won't achieve for decades, Chief Engineer Elthera reported to the gathered scientists. The quantum field configurations are more sophisticated than anything in our databases. Dr. Yelnara was studying her readings with expressions of wonder and confusion. The entity count during the crisis appeared to increase dramatically. Young Krelana reported seeing dozens of beings working on different aspects of the reactor. This suggests that these entities can collaborate in large numbers when faced with sufficiently complex challenges. Jake nodded as he cleaned his tools. The elves have their own hierarchy and specializations. For routine repair work, you get the local workshop helpers. For complex engineering challenges, they call on the specialists. For something that threatens fundamental stability, they bring in the Forge Masters who work with the basic forces of reality. Forge Masters, repeated Dr. Vexrin, making notes. Entities that can manipulate matter and energy at quantum levels. This implies a highly organized society with advanced understanding of physics. More advanced than ours, apparently, added the Zentorian physicist. The modifications to our reactor system demonstrate principles that our science hasn't even theorized yet. The implications of what had happened were staggering. Jake hadn't just prevented a disaster. He had provided a demonstration of technology that surpassed the capabilities of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. The reactor modifications alone represented scientific advances that would revolutionize energy production throughout known space. But, perhaps more importantly, the crisis had revealed the true scope of human entity cooperation. When faced with a genuine emergency that threatened thousands of lives, Jake's invisible helpers had responded with resources and capabilities that exceeded anything previously witnessed. The question now, Commander Thonora said, as the crowds of scientists began analyzing their data, is what this means for humanity's role in galactic civilization. If humans have access to assistance from entities with such advanced capabilities, it means we've been underestimating human potential for 60 years, completed Dr. Yelnara. And it suggests that human technological development isn't limited by conventional scientific principles. As word of the reactor crisis and its resolution spread throughout galactic communication networks, requests for information and additional demonstrations poured in from across known space. The Galactic Council was demanding a formal investigation. The major scientific institutions were calling for comprehensive studies, and several planetary governments were quietly inquiring about the possibility of hiring human technicians for their most critical infrastructure projects. Jake Morrison, chief mechanic of a remote asteroid mining station, had accidentally become the most famous human in the galaxy. But more than that, he had opened the door to a new understanding of human capabilities that would reshape interspecies relations and challenge the foundations of galactic science. The universe was about to learn that humans were far more than the primitive species most civilizations had assumed them to be. And the entities that humans called Elves were about to become the most studied phenomenon in galactic history. 6 months after Jake Morrison's demonstration on Kepler's Edge, the galaxy was still reeling from the implications of human entity cooperation. The remote asteroid mining station had been transformed into the unofficial center of galactic xenobiological research, with permanent scientific installations from dozens of civilizations monitoring and studying the phenomenon that had challenged fundamental assumptions about reality itself. Jake stood in what had once been his simple maintenance bay, now expanded into a sophisticated research facility that bustled with activity around the clock. Alien scientists worked alongside human researchers who had been brought in from Earth and human colonies throughout the sector. The cooperation between species had reached levels that would have been unthinkable before his accidental revelation. The latest reports from a human homeworld are fascinating, Dr. Yelnara said, approaching with her usual collection of data pads and scanning equipment. Your species' government has confirmed that approximately 12% of adult humans retain some level of ability to perceive and interact with these entities. The percentage is much higher among children, but most lose the connection as they mature. Jake nodded as he observed a team of young aliens learning to perceive as invisible helpers under the guidance of human instructors. The breakthrough had come when researchers discovered that children from most species could develop the ability to see and interact with the entities, although the specific neural patterns required varied significantly between different biological architectures. The most interesting development, continued Dr. Yelnara, is the discovery of similar entities associated with other species' traditional folklore. Thackeray workshop spirits, Zentorian quantum dancers, Vorthan crystal singers, beings that were dismissed as primitive superstition, but now appear to be real phenomena that different species perceive through their own cultural filters. That makes sense, Jake replied, watching as a young Thackeray successfully directed invisible helpers in assembling a complex mechanical device. The elves aren't specifically human. They're drawn to creativity and craftsmanship wherever they find it. Humans just happen to maintain better contact with them through our development. The transformation in galactic society had been rapid and profound. The revelation that multiple species had access to beings with advanced understanding of physics had triggered a renaissance in scientific thinking. Old assumptions about the limits of technology and the nature of reality had been abandoned in favor of more flexible theoretical frameworks that could accommodate entities operating outside conventional spacetime. Commander Thelnara approached with a communication device displaying messages from across the galaxy. Jake, you have requests for demonstration from the Galactic Council, the Zentorian Science Academy, and at least 40 planetary governments. There's also a rather urgent message from Earth's diplomatic corps about a potential crisis situation. Jake accepted the communication device and reviewed the priority messages. The urgent one was from Ambassador Patricia Chun, humanity's primary representative to the Galactic Council. Morrison, her recorded message began, "We need you at the Council chambers on Nexus Prime as quickly as possible. There's been a development that threatens to destabilize the entire galactic political structure, and you might be the only person who can help resolve it. A hegemony dreadnought has suffered catastrophic system failures in the neutral zone, and conventional rescue efforts have failed. They're specifically requesting human assistance, but the implications go far beyond a simple rescue operation." Jake frowned as he processed the message. The hegemony was the galaxy's most powerful military alliance, representing nearly 60 species in a confederation that had maintained peace and stability for over 2 centuries. If one of their most advanced warships was in crisis and requesting human help, the political ramifications would be enormous. "I need to go," he told Commander Thelnara. "This sounds like something that could affect human-galactic relations for decades to come." Dr. Yelnara stepped forward eagerly. "I'm coming with you. This could be the most significant demonstration of human-entity cooperation ever witnessed. The scientific value alone. This isn't a research expedition, Doctor," Jake interrupted. "If a dreadnought is disabled in the neutral zone, there are probably thousands of lives at stake. And if it's a hegemony vessel, there are political considerations that go beyond scientific curiosity." 3 days later, Jake found himself aboard the human diplomatic vessel Rising Phoenix, approaching the coordinates where the hegemony dreadnought Eternal Vigilance hung dead in space. The massive warship, nearly 20 kilometers long and capable of destroying entire fleets, was dark and silent, its quantum drives offline, and its defensive systems inoperative. Ambassador Chun briefed Jake as they observed the disabled vessel through the ship's main viewing port. The Eternal Vigilance suffered cascading system failures during routine exercises. Their quantum computer network crashed, taking out navigation, life support, weapons, and propulsion. Conventional repair efforts have failed because the damage is too complex and interconnected for normal techniques. "Why are they asking for human help specifically?" Jake asked, studying the tactical displays showing the dreadnought's condition. "Because word of your capabilities has spread throughout the hegemony command structure," Ambassador Chen replied. "They know the humans can accomplish impossible repairs using methods that exceed conventional technology." "But Jake, this is more than just a rescue mission. If you succeed in repairing their most advanced warship using human techniques, it will fundamentally change humanity's status in galactic politics." The political implications were staggering. Humans were currently considered a minor species in galactic affairs, tolerated but not particularly influential. Successfully repairing a hegemony dreadnought would demonstrate capabilities that could elevate humanity to major power status overnight. Admiral Krextar of the Hegemony 4th Fleet met them at the dreadnought's main airlock. The massive reptilian being was clearly uncomfortable requesting help from a species his people had long considered primitive, but the crisis aboard his flagship had forced him to swallow his pride. "Human Morrison," the Admiral said formally, "I am told you possess abilities that exceed conventional engineering principles. Our finest technicians and quantum specialists have been unable to restore our ship's systems. If you can repair the eternal vigilance, the hegemony will consider itself in humanity's debt." Jake followed the Admiral through corridors filled with disabled technology and frustrated alien engineers. The Dreadnought's quantum computer core was located deep within the ship's most protected sections, surrounded by layers of defensive systems and backup technologies that represented the pinnacle of galactic military engineering. "The cascading failure began in the primary quantum matrix," explained Chief Engineer Valterra, a tall, thin being whose species Jake didn't immediately recognize. "The quantum entanglement networks that coordinate all ship systems became corrupted by feedback loops that we cannot trace or correct. Every attempt to restart the system results in immediate recorruption." Jake examined the quantum computer core, a massive crystalline structure that hummed with barely contained energy. The diagnostic displays showed chaos, thousands of quantum pathways flickering between states, quantum entanglement networks forming random connections, and processing nodes crashing and restarting in endless loops. "This is one of the most complex systems I've ever encountered," he said, running his hands over the control interfaces. "The quantum entanglement network alone involves billions of individual connections, all of which need to be perfectly synchronized for the system to function." He paused, appearing to listen to voices only he could hear. "But you're right, friends. Complexity doesn't make something impossible, just challenging. If we can identify the core corruption and work our way outward, we can restore the entire network." Ambassador Chun and Admiral Krextar watched as Jake began his work, assisted by invisible entities that only he could perceive. But this time was different. Within minutes of beginning the repair process, several of the watching aliens began pointing at areas around Jake where the air seemed to shimmer. "I can see them," whispered one of the hegemony technicians, a young being whose large eyes were focused intently on the space around Jake. "There are dozens of them, working on different parts of the system simultaneously." Word spread quickly through the ship as more crew members developed the ability to perceive Jake's invisible helpers. The entities working on the quantum computer core were larger and more complex than those that handled routine repairs. They moved through solid matter as if it didn't exist, working directly on quantum entanglement networks that should have been impossible to access without dismantling the entire core. "The quantum field fluctuations are extraordinary," reported the ship's science officer, studying her instruments with obvious fascination. "The entities appear to be manipulating quantum states directly, without any intermediate technology. They're working on levels of reality that our science considers theoretical." Jake continued his coordination efforts, managing what appeared to be a massive team of invisible specialists. "The corruption is deeper than it first appeared," he explained to the watching officers. "It's not just random quantum noise. Something has fundamentally altered the way the system processes information. We're going to need to rebuild the core architecture from scratch while the system is running." The repair work proceeded with the same impossible efficiency that had characterized Jake's previous demonstrations, but on a vastly larger scale. The quantum computer core represented technology that exceeded anything on the mining station by several orders of magnitude. Yet Jake and his helpers approached it with the same confident competence they brought to routine maintenance tasks. "The quantum entanglement networks are being restructured in real time," reported Chief Engineer Valterra, her voice carrying notes of wonder and disbelief. "The processing efficiency is actually improving as the repairs proceed. This is beyond anything in our technical databases." Admiral Krextar studied the diagnostic displays as his ship's systems began coming back online one by one. Navigation, life support, communications, weapons, propulsion, each system activated with performance parameters that exceeded original specifications. "How is this possible?" he asked Ambassador Chen. "Our most advanced engineers couldn't even diagnose the problem. Yet this single human is rebuilding our entire quantum computer network while it operates." "Admiral," Ambassador Chen replied with obvious pride, "you're witnessing capabilities that humanity has possessed for thousands of years, but only recently began to demonstrate openly. We call them elves, but they're far more than folklore. They're partners who help us accomplish things that conventional science considers impossible." The quantum computer core was now operating at efficiency levels that exceeded its design parameters by enormous margins. The cascading failures that had disabled the dreadnought had been not just repaired, but transformed into optimizations that improved every aspect of the ship's performance. "All systems restored and optimized," Jake announced, stepping back from the quantum core with obvious satisfaction. "Your ship is now operating better than it ever has before. The modifications should prevent this type of cascading failure from ever happening again." Admiral Krextar studied his ship's status displays with expressions that cycled through disbelief, gratitude, and something approaching awe. "Human Morrison, you have saved not only my crew, but also my honor. The hegemony does not forget such debts." But the implications extended far beyond personal gratitude. Word of the successful repair spread throughout the hegemony fleet within hours, and from there to the broader galactic community. Humanity had just demonstrated the ability to repair and improve the most advanced military technology in known space, using capabilities that exceeded anything possessed by major galactic powers. The political ramifications were immediate and profound. Within days of the Eternal Vigilance returning to active duty, Jake received formal invitations from dozens of planetary governments requesting assistance with critical infrastructure projects. The Galactic Council voted to grant humanity full member status, with representation equal to species that have been part of galactic civilization for millennia. But perhaps most importantly, the success aboard the Hegemony Dreadnought had opened the door to unprecedented cooperation between species. The revelation that multiple civilizations had access to entities similar to what humans called elves had triggered collaborative research projects that were revolutionizing science and technology throughout known space. Jake found himself at the center of a transformation that extended far beyond anything he had imagined when he first decided to silence some mocking alien children. The universe was discovering that reality contained more possibilities than conventional science had ever dreamed, and humanity had become the catalyst for a renaissance that would reshape galactic civilization for generations to come. As he prepared to return to his simple maintenance duties on Kepler's Edge, Jake reflected on how much had changed since that first demonstration 6 months ago. The galaxy no longer saw humans as a primitive species that had stumbled onto advanced technology through luck. Instead, they were beginning to understand that humanity possessed capabilities that complemented and exceeded conventional scientific methods. The young aliens who had once mocked the idea of elves were now among the most eager students learning to perceive and work with the entities that humans had partnered with for millennia. And throughout known space, scientists and engineers were discovering that the universe was far stranger, more wonderful, and more collaborative than they had ever imagined. Jake Morrison, chief mechanic of a remote asteroid mining station, had accidentally become the architect of a new age of galactic cooperation and discovery. But, as he often told the researchers who continued to study his work, he was just doing what humans had always done, finding practical ways to solve impossible problems with the help of friends who understood that the universe was full of possibilities waiting to be explored.